In our last video we looked at how to use markers and pencils and pens to render a drinks bottle. This time we're going to look at how to do a can. So once again we're using bleed-proof paper and the same equipment, which is markers, white pen, scissors, glue stick, pencil and thin black pens. The first step, like any other renderings we've done, is to have a sketch done on a separate piece of paper, which you will then put your bleed-proof paper on top of and trace the outline of very lightly. Okay, we have the basic outline of our can, and our first step is to start on the body and make it look round. We're going to do it slightly differently to our previous example, where we shaded evenly, dark on the edges into light in the middle. That works well for objects that are not shiny, but as soon as we're looking at something that's shiny, we need to change the way that we do it. It's all about adding streaks of light. To achieve this, we're going to have a really light streak next to a really dark streak, but apart from that it's still going to contour to dark on the edges and lighter into the middle. The first step is, from halfway, vertical strokes to do one half of the can. Just as quick and even as you can. So halfway out. We're now going to come over to the other side and do about a finger's width or less of texture there as well. Following our earlier principle, we know we want it to be very dark on the very edges. So we'll add that in now, following the contour. Dark on the very edges. One more step here. The trick to making something look shiny is to have a very dark bit next to a very light bit. So where this white's going to be next to it, we want also to be dark. So we'll build up that as well. So now you can see that we have very dark in the middle, and it blends into slightly lighter and then very dark on the end. And on this side we have very dark down the side, getting slightly lighter. This is where our chalk comes in. First step is to pick a colour that matches as closely as possible. We're going to lay down that chalk on the left hand side of our white gap. We don't want to put any at the moment next to the centre. So we're just going to do that very lightly because we're going to smudge it afterwards. It's important to remember you can always add more, but it's hard to take away once it's on the page. So now smudging that in to make it look smooth. And we can start to smudge it up towards the white, but we always want to leave this very edge completely white. Okay, so we've tried to blend in the chalk to the marker as close as possible, and then we've faded it to white in towards the centre, and that's the basis of our shininess. One other bit, the bottom of the can curls away slightly, so we're just going to add an even amount of chalk and smudge it under here, just a little shadow. At the top, however, the can curls in and faces up. So in the same way, we want to put a tiny bit of white chalk smudge that in to make a little highlight. You might like to use a different finger to smudge for this, otherwise you'll just smudge blue. Okay, we have the body of our can finished. We can now cut it out. Okay, we've now cut out the body of our can, and it's time to start working on the top lid section. So, like always, we'll slide it underneath and we'll trace the shape of the top lid just lightly in pencil. If anything, you need to do this slightly bigger. This can always be cut down later on. Okay, our next step is to get a grey marker. Light grey is better. For this one, I'll use slightly darker. And we just want to evenly streak across it, straight lines, as light and fast as we can. And we have the top of our can. Okay, time to add some details to our can. We can take our pencil, since we're working in grey, the colour matches. The first thing you need to do is draw the inside of the ring in pencil, just a little bit, just dark enough to see it just inside your outline. Whole way around, as even as possible, the gap. Okay, the next step at the moment, so you can see you have your outline and you've just drawn another line just inside. You need to draw a third line, but just half of the circle on the top, just like that. Okay, that gives the can a little bit of height. Our next step is to draw in our ring pull, which from side on is this type of shape. You might like to do some practices on another sheet of paper before you do it onto your drawing. Okay, ring pull. And the last step is the bit that actually breaks open on the can where the liquid comes out. Okay, we have all our basic shapes on, but like anything else, they're going to have shadows. If the light is coming from the top, all the undersides are going to have shadows. So this bit needs to be darker here, this bit needs to be darker here, and this bit darker here, those three bits. So you can go along your line and make them quite a bit darker. It'll give them a good 3D effect. Okay, you might also like to draw a very light line just next to that. That'll give it a little bit more thickness. Okay, final step, it's metal, so it needs to have some light reflections. This is where our specialist white texture comes in. This draws just like liquid paper. We're going to use it to put some dots for highlights, and they're going to be where the metal faces up. So probably one on the edge of this tab, one on the edge of the rim here and here. You want them to be very small dots, and you don't want too many. You want them to be fairly random. Maybe 4 on the top. Another nice touch you might like to do is to draw a little dot halfway down there, and that will add to the overall effect when it's finished. We're now ready to cut out the top of our can. Okay, we've cut our lid and we've put it in place. Looks nice and metallic and shiny. See, we've got the little details in the lid to make it look 3D. At this stage, if you'd like to, you can do a background like we did on the bottle, which when you do the final layout might help it pop out of the page a little bit. Or you could do a label, which you could trace to get the size and then stick onto the end. A different effect I'll show you is if you had a two-tone metallic can. We'll set up this one like a Red Bull can. So what I need to do for that is to draw another can at almost exactly the same size. So I'm just going to trace quickly onto the paper. I'm going to follow all the same steps as before, but this time I'm going to do it with my second colour, and I'm going to try grey. So starting the first half evenly, just like we did with the blue, the outside finger width, then we made the inside darker and the very outsides darker. Next thing we did was get a matching colour and put it down very lightly on the page and start to blend that in. It's a bit harder with grey, it doesn't look as natural. Okay, a little shadow along the bottom. And with the white, our little shadow highlight across the top. Okay, if this is going to be a two-tone Red Bull can, we would have 4 areas, 2 of which would be blue, 2 of which will be grey. So what I'm going to do is mark where I want my different sections to be, so that might be halfway, and then down the middle. I'm going to cut out this piece and this piece, and I'm going to stick them on top of the other one. Okay, we've cut out our 2 grey pieces. You can see where they're missing from here, and we've placed them as close as we could in line. I actually had to trim the blue can to get them sizes to match, but they're not stuck down yet, so there's still some little shadows. But you can see how you can make a can look 2 different colours but not having to draw it all on one sheet. It's a technique that we used in our example where we used a purple and a blue to do lettering to get the ML in there. We've used it the same way to do the Red Bull style can with the 2 tones. From here you could still do lettering or a label and stick it over the top, mount it all on a background, and you'll end up with a really nice rendering of a can. These techniques with making things look shiny work on most shiny objects. So something like a car, you're going to have really light streaks next to really dark streaks. Here's an example here. The reason this looks shiny is we've got really dark orange next to white, and then we just blended it in between. Same with the window, really dark next to white. Different view. We've got our really dark sections underneath, and we've got our really shiny sections over the top. All of these things are used to make things pop out of the page, to add contour, to make them look 3D. It's all the same basic skills that we've covered in this video.